Chill here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and let's talk about the very exciting topic mold. We haven't talked about mold and fungi in a while, and I noticed the lime wash trend. So next month I'm going to try to buy this green lime juice and try it on the walls of my house, but also try to gargle that and see how it works. Now, lime wash is a method that was preserved by the ancients to preserve wells from mold and to maintain good temperature. But here's the thing, lime wash was even banned. And if I take a look at the communities that use lime wash, I understand why lime wash was banned. Because they protected from mold in the structure, but their sexual behavior was violating and dishonoring sovereignty. And then that resulted in a ban on that which protects from mold. What is rape but a ban on that which protects from mold? And that's how we got lime wash banned. Now, why is it retrieving? It's retrieving right about the Epstein list exposure where people are like, wait a second, I thought Deepak Chopra was a cool guy. I would, a lot of men have this crisis where they're like, I try to be a better man. I listen to the spiritual gurus, and then this so-called this man that is supposed to be me taking responsibility over my life path, spiritual path, inner work, shadow work, is a child molester. Now, okay, some of the things they said are right, but what are some of the things they said that might be a part of him being a child molester? Or it can be that his teachings are banned. Now, when people begin to basically awaken in that way, suddenly we see, oh, the Amish used to use lime wash because these Epsteins taking our housing. It's kind of like, yeah, but for housing we need. How are we going to take care of a property when I'm not raped? I have energy. And then it's like, wait, it's way more simple. If I have a lime wash once, that's oh, that's something I can do. Like even if I can't do the lime wash, I can have, if one person donates lime and a couple of people that can work donate labor, then even the elderly and the disabled have a house that they're not going to have to maintain the mold around or the leakiness around or the temperature in the summer. How will they build a house? Well, we need land, and we need land that's not toxic. Okay, you can build it from the land. You can build it from the house, the mud, and then you lime wash the mud, and you got a house. Hmm. So that's the housing crisis. That's the big scary thing. But why were houses banned? And we can literally say that housing was banned. They banned housing. And same reason line wash was banned. If people are raped in their own house, astrally or not, practically what it means is that they have a housing issue, both in a Mars sense of real estate, but also sense of self, and as a place where they are nourished and safe, which is Moon, a place where they can be who they are, Aries, Mars Aries, and a place where they are accepted, understood, nourished, and safe, which is Moon or Cancer. What happens? What is a pandemic since housing was banned? Cancer. The growth or anomaly in the growth of cells, but what cells? Cancerous cells. Now let's talk about molding the body. Molding the body is a result of chronic inability to occupy fully, to be fully present in our body, which is trauma induced. Now, what does the mold, what does the fungi does? If you take a look at Candida, it's one type of fungal infection. It tries to manipulate us to eat food that's not healthy for us, but makes the fungi grow. Namely, unrefined, excessive sugar and unrefined sugar. What does Candida grows on? Yeast. What is that? Where do we grow yeast? In our vagina. um, why? Well, after the Me Too, there was this sex positive Jade Egg course that was teaching people to not rape themselves or others, even in self pleasure. And it was paying such important emphasis on being ready and so on, and the embodied practice, not to fantasize about the this or that, but actually be in the body, actually feel the bodily presence, the sensual presence. If psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy works with the fantasy realm, then the embodied practice works with the sensual, with the basically learning relaxed arousal through self. Now, what about religions and cultures that don't allow people to self pleasure? Well, um, men can learn sperm retention. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, um, but essentially we see that those cultures are infested with Epstein rings and energy siphoning practices. In fact, I remember there was a woman that escaped a violent partner, or a partner that did the shadow work but became violent, and she always knew how to make money. And then she said she learned to self pleasure as good as if she would make love with another, or even better. And she had to hack into her bank account, to escape him back to, she was from Israel, so back to Israel. But then when it came to business discussion, she was not directly communicating pricing, um, which is shadow work, because But through sales, we see that a lot. That does a person actually communicate that they sell a product, or does a person communicate something that looks like they invite a person that's having a difficulty to be there, even though that person can't pay, and then they expect payment where the situation hasn't changed, and a person said that they can't pay right now, or that they can't pay. Maybe they will be able to pay when there are dividends, if it's like a financial freedom course. And they're like, no, I want you to be on that course. And it's like, oh, where is the payment? Wait a second. You tell me something is subsidized, and now what do I receive from that? It's not about shame and blame. Is that there is something to do with the will and consent around sexuality that was missing. Zero shame, zero blame. Just awareness. And it had an effect that one person was expecting that the other person understood they expect to be compensated, but they did not listen when the other person said, no, I'm not able to pay. And I said, no, okay, no matter, no, doesn't matter. I still want you here with us. Okay? Basically, as a person that would give a lot of completely subsidized readings, particularly for people that were in my situation at the time, then it seems legit. Um, that misunderstanding was solved, I hope, but but this is showing us how lacking the practice of willing consent and withdrawn consent and clarity affects business. And so, and by the way, some of my clients were the people that I had, for example, there was a person that when I was without housing, they were hosting me for quite some time. And then we would find out the core issues, and the core issues were also about them thinking that what somebody wears is more important, and so on and so forth. And they had a dream to have a house where people could relax before they go on to the next phase in life. So hosting me was a dream come true to them. There were two people like that, and then one of them I didn't even know, I didn't even remember, was a person that I advised to. And then they learned their boundaries. But I had clove oil. Clove is Jupiter, and I'm a night chart, and they were trying to address issues of sexual boundary violation through Jupiter, which is basically through choice rather than through self-value. It was a choice about clothing rather than doesn't matter what somebody wears. Um, but basically, that was my housing for several weeks. And they had a reality check that what it actually takes, that a person is in between houses, they need a house. It's not a retreat or to improve their choices in life or all those beautiful Jupiterian things. But they need a house. And for them, they actually learned They said, well, for me, it took me time to learn how to maintain a house, how to. Now, it sounds reasonable until we learn about lime wash. Okay? And indeed, they had a very good landlord that skipped the payments for 3 months during the crisis. And they realized that they themselves, it was draining on them to have me in their house, which is very understandable because homeless people need housing. If they would have this place where people can relax and so on, and it can be lovely for retreat, but they would need to have what? Funding from somewhere, whether government or private. But this funding is supposed to be to the housing of the homeless people first. And there were two people that hosted me for about a month. Both of them had this particular dream, so they were seeing me as a practice, and both of them had to realize what it actually means. Homeless people need housing. No, it's not about the bad. It's not about bad choices. It's not even about manifestation and reality creation, because I was manifesting, and it was something that tries to interfere and siphon that. And by the way, a lot of the things that when I was treating toenail fungi, then which reminds me to have my isen. Now, one of the things, if it is something like house chores or something that is self care, even brushing our teeth, it needs to be tasty. It needs to smell good. It needs to be something we are looking forward to do. In the beginning, I was so energy drained from all the, you know, Epstein Academia environment around. And of course, when somebody's energy drained, they're also energy draining. They can't do anything. The energy is low. And basically, they're seen as pests. But if people went against sexual violence, then they would have a lot less. Because what happens? The revolutions that people did not do to make the working sector not uh, pest, pe- not pests, created a situation where people couldn't work and were seen as the pests of society. Because at first they couldn't work, so they studied. Then they tried to work, but they didn't want to rape children. Then they were attacked, so they couldn't clean the house. And then they had no money, and so they depended on welfare to pay rent. And then they tried to come out of that situation, and being again attacked. Now they gone missing. So now people are shit fuck worried, but hey, weren't those people the people that said the Me Too went too far? That voted out women rights in elections, in so-called democratic elections. Our voting counts. And now they got a lot of what they were. Like, let's say a person is too busy to actually go voting. They don't have the energy, or they have post trauma. So there's a challenge in representation, and the connection between the bots and the representation is even more severed. Now we begin to cross a very, not even to cross. We begin to approach a very, very risky situation, where those people will become more and more susceptible, if they are, to violence, and then that violence, if their sovereignty is not honored, is basically becoming mind control. Then terror happens, assassinations happen. So and so political assassination. Amazing. Where were they at the Me Too? Oh, but evidence and evidence and evidence. Okay, then outside of the court system, how do they ensure that people are not raped? Oh, we can't do anything. Okay, then people couldn't do anything. They could offer a police enforced jail that for the person that's being targeted, rather than exactly what women that try to escape violence are dealing with. Okay, it's not karma. It's simply the point that our vote matters. Our opinions matter. Our opinions shape policies, and those policies meet us, and they can be benefic or not. And by the way, if we say that they're not benefic, it's also the time where we can change the people that are alive. But if they didn't prevent murder of women or rape of women, or rape of boys, for example, in the secret societies, then assassinations happen, terror happens, genocides happen. And people try to blame it on the other authorities. Though, let's say tomorrow Israel has to pay shilumim for Palestine. If people go against rape, they will say, wait a second, the extortion cults that trafficked women and children and men in Israel and looted and infiltrated the system to commit decisions and military strategy that accumulated to be in a genocide, they need to pay. Oh, they were funded by the banks. Amazing, the banks need to pay. The banks need to pay shilumim to Palestine, but they also need to pay shilumim to the trafficked children and women and men within Israel. That way we prevent a future genocide. Now, as we treat mold, for example, with aromatherapy, we also need to change nutrition. The mallow that grows naturally has less contamination on it than the fruits and vegetables, even organic, bought in the supermarket. Oh, wait a second, it also grows naturally, which is because I tried when I was in academia to eat my greens, and probably there was a house deposit sitting there in the supermarket. Now, at that time, Uranus was going through Aries. I was trying many things. I was trying raw veganism. I was. Somebody would have told me, "Hey, Shirley, eat some mellow." I would have done that. I, I didn't even know that's enough. I didn't know how to forage. And the people that were teaching foraging, one was sexually harassing this, another was sexually harassing that, and all were saying that that's their nature. Behind that nature, there is molestation of boys in secret societies, which create hypersexuality or sexual avoidance. But and when people talked about narcissism, they said there is the cerebral narcissist and there is the somatic narcissist. Somatic narcissist was addicted to sex. Other types of narcissists could sometimes be what they call denying sex or not having sex. They were raped, and so either they become hypersexual or basically sex avoidant, which is why they tend to mingle. Everybody that mingles with them becomes borderline, and people that to begin with did not have secure attachment and weren't accessing relaxed arousal were running into narcissists. What's the core issue? Both were raped, or both were raped, whether in the astral or had infiltration of their nervous system in a way that was rapey, even if it was not physical rape. Both people will have housing issues. Either one could have big mansions, big this, big that, but never feel at home. But the other one could be struggling to even find a place or be avoiding tending to the place. I was renting an apartment as a tenant, and then I tried to take care of under the sink. They said it's not a problem. I'll take it out. I'll clean it. I'll put it back. I took it out. I cleaned it. I try to put it back, and the puzzle doesn't compile. All the parts are there. So I put a bucket. Now Pluto was just ingressed into Aquarius, and Saturn in Capricorn is plumbing, but Aquarius is air sign. So the so the plumbing. Why doesn't she call somebody to fix it? Is a woman living alone in her. Well, I have power. I'll fix it. Maybe it's a remedy for Pluto in Aquarius. By the way, it can be because Mars ruled fourth houses, and I have Pluto ruled by the ruler of that Mars. Um, Mars with Mars related housing, it's better to have a wall that is not completely built, and not to fix it because Mars tends to break and rebuild, and also Pluto. So having that as the plumbing was actually benefic because I would clean that. It was basically be more clean. I'm not saying that I'm gonna for sure adapt it to, but having like a compost Pluto can be compost toilet, for example. Um, Nikola Stojanovic had great housing remedies. We would take the energy, and if Feng Shui, for example, would tell us, oh, everything must be fixed, nothing that is old can be. And then we would have other arts that say, oh, we color the broken vase with gold. But then when we look at Nikola Stojanovic, it's like, Well, if there is a Mars ruling over the house, then we want a wall that's not completely built. Because Mars energy will go there rather than keeping breaking things or relationships to be transformed. Now, a culture that is sexually abusive is a culture of pests. And indeed, the most resistance I met friction from society was when I began to treat my toenail fungi. Because people that try to attach themselves to a person and harvest from them, they need yeast, they need mold, they need that person to be craving food is not good for them. Because they depend on that. It's kind of like that. The addicted people depend on people to feed their addictions, and it creates pests like. Now, I wouldn't say pests if these people wouldn't be sexually abusive, and if these people wouldn't say all kind of names about the people that they seek to harvest from. And if people looted, they banned housing, they banned jobs. Slavery is not a job, rape is not a job, rape is not a housing. So what happened to the people that they say, okay, we'll pay you not to work? Amazing. Oh, why don't you work? You're a pest on society, why don't you work? All the struggles that all the things that I said no to and the society embraced and did not accommodate for a housing without rape, for work without rape, any type of work, okay? Whether it's waitress, why doesn't the barista that makes my coffee have a chair? What were they thinking would happen? Because if I would live in residence where is rape, then I would be basically I would become sick from that. If I work at the workplace, there are rapists, or there are people that, I'm sorry, masturbate on people being raped. I wouldn't even know to diagnose what it is, but it would be allergies, or there would be agitation, stress, not comfortable being around these people.
שמתי את הבושם שאת נתת לי, רציתי פשוט להריח קצת.
Mm-hmm.
מריחים?
Yeah. It would also make, let's say, if I was violated and something infiltrates, then it would also create a situation where I would need my own space. And so it's kind of like, okay, we removed the job that was pest like, we removed the house that was pest like, we removed the people that were pest like, we removed the sexual practices that were pest like. Now we need to remove the mold, okay? We'll eat more mellow, less processed food. Oh, lo and behold, Epstein ring fell. Remove the spiritual bypassing. We began to address the horror that in their sight I would not have housing, income, or any social connections without being dissociated from rape culture, within and outside. And then we began to require for cultural changes. It became very obvious after the meet, well, I can't work in a workplace where the men and the women have all kinds of sexual jokes that I feel disgust, vomiting, something that would create chronic inflammation in my body. Of course, that would make me go cuckoo. What if that workplace is the Israeli Palestinian Chamber of Commerce? And they're thinking to have Middle East peace through trade. And the ex-head of intelligence juxtaposes me and one of the biggest food companies, founder of Israel, and that guy begins to talk about it. I have a house here, I have a house there, and I just find it funny. But my boss, ex-head of intelligence, doesn't find it funny. Say, hey, maybe you get something there, he gets something there. Like these people don't know shit from their life about an orgasm. Now here is the really funny part. If that person was honoring the erotic, non-erotic self, shaping the policies in ways that I'm not dependent on him for housing, then perhaps we would have, I don't know if we're compatible or not, this rape-based mindset negated any ability to even consider, because that would make me sick. It's not about their looks or even with their age or whatnot. It's about the mindset, because I wasn't, 15, and he wasn't my boss. And even the women there, they were used to the fact that people that would come to that job as apprentice, they would be having the mindset, oh, they come to have, and the head of intelligence simply told me the main thing about this job is that you work here, you're going to meet people, you're going to have, and indeed, you meet economists, you meet, people at the, I didn't meet worldly billionaires, but definitely the people that would come to make business with Palestine. And then I couldn't, I did not even take and my boss was worried. It was like, she didn't even come to pick up the money that she deserved because it was apprenticeship. The apprenticeship was not paid, but they deserved money for the public transportation. I did not even come to pick it up, not because I didn't need that money. Now, from their perspective, it's an intergenerational gap. And mind you, that's the head of intelligence. It's either Shabak or Mossad, ISIS or Mossad. I was not in the intelligence, but, and so I began to feel bad. And here's the thing. Nobody touched me, nobody, okay? That alone, that interaction alone was suffice to make me feel so sick that I physically couldn't come to work. And the women around, they were expecting women that would try to get to know this and get to know that and so on and so forth. And I said it's an intergenerational gap. Because when it came, how did I run into this job? I was at One Voice. It was One Voice Israel, One Voice Palestine. Right before One Voice was turned into V Fanatic, V Genocide. No, they wanted to have a demonstration against Benjamin Netanyahu that reminded me of what was happening before the assassination of Rabin. They wanted to turn my peace party into a goodbye Bibi party, which would feed on the energy that could be transmuted in favor of Bibi. That's infiltration. But right before that came a guy that works at the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce looking for apprentice. And I'm like, you're looking for me? You say my name. Can sound like somebody say my name. That's so fucking interesting. I gotta see what's that. Ex-head of intelligence, me, knowing nothing from my life. Taking the train from the south, 2 hours. For Americans, it sounds like nothing. That's a ride to work and back. But for Israel, it's traveling half a country. Meeting an economist that tells me there's no problem of abundance. We even have the means to retransport or redistribute the goods. There's enough. When I hear that from an economist that knows the numbers, I discovered that Bennett, he would sell the material for building for for Palestine. It's business. Right wing, righter wing than Benjamin Netanyahu. So definitely, it's kind of like it's an interesting place. There is peace committee. There's a trade. Biggest food company. Biggest Israeli food company. People want to do business with Palestine. Now, you say, surely, how come it's Chamber of Commerce, Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce, but there isn't a Palestinian state? I don't know, Fulkinus. Business is business. I have no idea. Tax evasion. I have no idea. Like, I don't even know if it's tax evasion. It's kind of like tax evasion. I really don't know. Business were running as usual, but Palestinians did not have. Now, the ex-intelligence heads were thinking, a lot of people were thinking there. I know Yitzchak Tshuva. I did not see Yitzchak Tshuva. I saw him in a conference, but I was not sitting next to him or anything like that. He wanted to have a trade-based interdependency on the water. It's kind of like reasoning. What would make peace? To some degree, Trump is like that as well. And as a millennial who knew nothing about the Epsteins, But by the way, I was targeted severely by the Arab states, but I knew nothing about them. I was like, yeah, I mean, why are we fighting when we could be growing? Why, like, we could be growing business, we could be prospering. Why are we fighting? When we get to the atmosphere around eroticism, I see that everything was behaving irrationally, which is why we did not have peace. Now, I was not, when I ran into such a thing, I was like, okay, what's my shadow work here? And as we tend to mold in our own body, the moldy structures begin to expose themselves. For example, if there was a difficulty about secure attachment, the toe, the right toe, there's the pinky and there's the toe after the pinky. Okay, that nail, which had to do with relation. If I took a look at the structure of the toe, it was a little bit weird. And I was born. My mother has Uranus in Cancer, co-present with my moon. Moon is relation. Uranus is something unusual. And of course, the structure of the toes, which would also be a blood flow issue. I have Uranus in Sag. Jupiter that rules it is in Capricorn. Uranus is something unusual. Jupiter is our feet. Our feet, and um, Saturn is our bones. So the bones of my toes had unusual structure that challenged blood flow, and that created stagnation. As I was beginning to tend to that, I was also beginning to recover from trauma bonds. After cutting away from my mother for 2 years during the Me Too, then I could begin to tend to that mold, which eventually, now I'm in way closer connection with my parents. And they learn that sometimes the word that they say and so on and so forth. They learn that to justify rape or to think that, oh, they were just trying to climb up the ladder, next to me is a no-go. They also learned that all the courses that they would do sometimes would be not courses like ritual, like bad words. That this type of jargon is not next to me. Now, did that not invoke a shit ton of inner demons? Of course it did. It probably still does. Because they concluded from false accusations on them when they weren't having the big mansion and they weren't having the big position because they did not rape children, but they were concluding the false accusations on them as the false accusations on the people that did rape children and thus got to have the big mansion and to have the big position. And by the way, why weren't they having a big position? They weren't raping children, but also what weren't they do? They weren't agreeing to have affairs with the boss. So they began to work as self-employed, but then they tried to block their ability to be self-employed. Oops, that happens also to their daughter. If a guy want to be with me, he has to shape the world in a way that accommodates for me and for women, whether we're together or alone. Whether is he pissed at me or not. And then, if we are compatible at the time and space where we both want, with the things that we both want, that we both enjoy, at a given time and space, that's the action potential for every time and space. Now, what happens if an entire country relies on intelligence that makes of everybody honeypots, which means torture and human trafficking? That structure can't go. That structure is the toenail fungi. That structure is the candida. That structure is ladies being prescribed estrogen in the United States for endometriosis. Estrogen encourages the growth of. Then they leave the country, and then something is not including endo, and then they get pregnant. Oh, but you can't say it. Took a lot of money for that IVF. Now, of course, the interaction, even with our parents and our elders, with people that grew without boundaries that are honored. And then what happened? A boom of people began to set boundaries. I remember when we were in V15, there was the Saudi Initiative for Peace. And I'm like, that meant Palestinians would get like 2 meters off the region of the Israel Palestine. What did we think would happen? And then there are Palestinians that are ready for that. Um, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated for less than a fraction of a percent for that. It's not Sadat. But what is the underlying question? Some people say religion, some people say land, some people say there's like, what if nobody raped? Then we can have business. Now the Mossad or Shabak, they had to work within a framework. Where that framework doesn't have will and consent in it, because even the Bible doesn't, and it doesn't have zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning in it, then they don't have a framework that can generate success, not business, not trade, not peace, not finding Ron Arad. I don't know if my ex-boss was on Epstein list or not. I did not meet Epstein on any of the meetings, but I was there for a very short time. Now, back then, I wasn't thinking much because to me it was like, well, I can't do this job. I was used to not being able to do a job. Because if I do a job, a bank falls. And sometimes I do a job, but not doing a job. I did not agree to cooperate with a credit fraud prior to the subprime. I was the reason multi-card was not closed when it just opened, particularly IMA. But then I refused to participate in a bigger uh, event because the previous event was me not knowing about this thing called class lawsuits and finding that something solves a problem for a client and doesn't charge them, so it's ethical for me to tell them that I renew the card to a card where they can actually repay the loan in their sum, not in a fixed sum. I did not know about class lawsuits, otherwise this conversation would have run different. The bank would probably litigate me and I'll probably own the bank. But the world is not ready for this times yet. Last time we tried to have a zero usury bank, there was a Dutch East India company that was. Now, we can't have a zero usury bank when there is rape, slavery, and energy siphoning. There's no point for me to. If somebody took a bank, biggest bank in the world, and say, surely now you own the bank. There's no point for me to take ownership of the bank as long as there is rape, slavery, and energy siphoning in society. The only thing for me to do would be to. And now here's the thing: if they'd give me that bank today, that bank would probably be bankrupt. What do they have? Oh, we have this estate and that estate and that estate and that estate. What are all these estates? People astrally raping tenants, and then people flipping, sending people to flip the housing. When they make a mess in the housing, and they would have to sell, and then people buy it, and there's no tenants, and then there's that estate. Amazing. Housing first, independent of ability to work. But first of all, who are the people who are the people who were evacuated from that estate? Oh, there's a bunch of them. Each and every one of them needs a house.